Michael Schumacher storming down the pit lane, absolutely livid, wanting to confront David Coulthard in his own garage, one of the most chaotic starts in Formula One history. Neither Schumacher brother happy. A Jordan 1-2, Jordan's first win in Formula One. Eddie Jordan himself skipping down the pit lane, feeling like a leprechaun, his words, not mine. And a new nickname for David Coulthard. Killer Coulthard. Welcome to the Belgium Grand Prix 1998. Okay, let's set the scene. So Mika Häkkinen is leading the Drivers' Championship and Michael Schumacher just wants to win this race. He wants to close the gap between himself and Mika, but come qualifying, Mika gets pole and it's a McLaren front row lockout because David Coulthard gets P2, Damon Hill gets P3 in the Jordan and Michael is 4th in the Ferrari. And come race day, of course it's Belgium, torrential rain, and Damon Hill actually gathers his Jordan crew together and he says, guys, it's raining, but this is our opportunity to win. Let's take that opportunity. The race starts and immediately it's chaos. David Coulthard slips. I believe he hit a drain cover, but it actually caused one of the most chaotic starts in Formula One history at the time because half of the grid was essentially wiped out. We did have a red flag, but the rules at the time basically stated that drivers could re-enter, and at the time we also had spare cars, so that definitely helped. The race gets going again, a few slips and slides. Mika is actually out of the race because of a earlier move that he made. David Coulthard is falling down in the standings and Damon Hill is actually leading up until lap 8 when Michael Schumacher took over. So this is it, right? Michael's chance to take the win, lead the championship. He's in contention, right? No. So David Coulthard, DC from now on, was down in 9th and he said that he couldn't see anything because of the spray. It was just that bad. And he came on the radio to ask his team to tell him when Michael was close by, when he was about to be lapped, so that he could move out of the way. And by this point, Michael had built up a lead of about 30 seconds to Damon Hill. So the time came, DC, getting confused, DC did actually slow down. However, Michael didn't see him and went into the back of him at 137 miles per hour. And it took off the front wing and a wheel of Michael's car and the rear wing of David Coulthard's car. And that's when we get that moment of Michael Schumacher storming down the pit lane, entering into the McLaren garage. The teams are having to keep them apart and Michael Schumacher said to DC, he was like, you tried to fucking kill me. And David's like, hold on a minute, you slammed into the back of me. Michael was fuming because yes, DC slowed, but it was on the racing line. And of course, his, chance for points and leading the championship in that moment were over. And funnily enough, actually, even in the wet, Michael was super, super rapid. I believe at one point that he even wanted to carry on with 3 wheels, but he was just that quick. But it's not over. We still had a chance for a Schumacher victory because Ralf Schumacher was driving for Jordan. So Damon Hill was leading and Ralf is catching up. He's rapid. And then Damon Hill comes on the radio because he knows his teammate is catching him up. He comes on the radio to talk to Eddie Jordan and is basically like, you will not be enacting any team orders or a swap today because we either fight and none of us wins or we keep it as it is. So they came on the radio to tell Ralf like, hey, keep cool, you're not supposed to fight, you're not going to overtake him. And they basically, he was ignoring them. They basically had to ask him 4 times before he even responded with like a very short response. And of course he wasn't happy at all because he was catching up. He could have won that race. And afterwards, Eddie Jordan said to Damon Hill, I've never seen you speak to me like that in the way that you spoke to me. This was the first win for Jordan after 126 starts. We had Ralf Schumacher in P2 sporting a similar kind of look as Michael was, and Jean Alesi in the Sauber. And we had a very funny dance from Eddie Jordan in the pit lane, him skipping down. And I think Damon Hill even called him like a demented kind of leprechaun, but Eddie Jordan called himself, he even said himself like, oh, I felt like a leprechaun. But then we come to the next race. David Coulthard is met with many a boos and banners that said, Killer Coulthard. Actually crazy. And actually, this is why Ralf moved to Williams, because after the race, Michael was fuming, of course, about his own race, but for his brother's race as well, the fact that he lost that win. He went to Eddie Jordan storming in the motorhome and basically was like, my brother will never race for you again, screw the contract, you screwed him over. And because at the time, Ralf was in contract negotiations with Jordan, and Eddie Jordan simply just said back like, hey, there's a buyout clause, pay the money, and yeah, he doesn't need to race for me. And that's exactly what they did. Of course, David and Michael made up, no hard feelings there. But the funny thing is that David once said to Michael, like, hey, are you ever wrong? And Michael just simply replied, well, not that I remember.